Well, he didn't tell me that he was unemployed because I was expecting Dorothy by then. Or Joan, not Dorothy.
Oh, yeah.
Joan. He didn't tell me, and he used to go out every morning at the usual time, and he'd go to a cousin in Tooting and type letters for jobs. And I found out that he was unemployed because he was so unlike himself. He was so quiet, and my cousin thought there was something wrong, so when I asked him, he told me. However, we just about got enough. We were glad of our savings.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't much to live on the dole in those days.
No.
So we were glad of our savings. We were glad we hadn't spent it all on a big wedding and all that, which we could have done. And he got a job at Letchworth. He had 2 jobs offered him after a while. One was at Curley.
What, Surrey?
Yes.
Of course, away, yeah.
And he decided on the Letchworth one. He'd heard it was a very pretty place, a garden city. So up to Letchworth we moved. Meanwhile, our savings were getting less and less with all this moving about. Cutting up liner and curtains and all that. We had to have new. Or we made do mostly, I think.
Yeah. You couldn't spend quite so lavishly as people do today.
Oh, we couldn't spend lavishly.
Yeah.
We had to be very, very careful. And we left the Streatham meeting with regret. It was a very nice meeting.
What meeting was that? An assembly, was it? Or?
Yes. Oh, yes. Once he went to Belmont Hall and got with the brethren. He never wanted to go anywhere else. And so we went to Letchworth and we got council house there. And he took on the job of instructor at a government training centre, instructing young men in drawing, draftsmanship. It was a, what would you call it, a rehabilitation scheme.
I suppose so, yeah.
Well, anyway, they were in need of draftsmen, and he taught them. I've got photos at home now of him with his young men, and he was very happy with that job. And one day he thought he'd like to do teaching, get a bit further on, teaching a college. And he was already doing evening classes at Derby Technical. It had been at Derby Technical College through a friend who recommended him. So when he went to Letchworth, he'd done a little teaching. That was all the training he had.
Yeah. Any other babies arrived at this time?
Dorothy, I keep saying Dorothy. Joan had arrived. She was born in Hitchin. Dorothy had arrived. Anyway, we all went to Derby. The same cousin helping us again. And some of his young men came round to pack up and help us move. And so off we went to Derby, to
Letchworth, is it?
Letchworth.
Yeah. How did Joan come to be born in Hitchin then?
Well, because that was the nearest nursing home.
Hmm.
I couldn't get into a hospital or anything there.
No.
So then we had three. And we moved to another place in Letchworth, opposite a school again for the children, and went to Gurnon Hall, little Bradron Hall at Letchworth. We made some good friends there. They were very good to me. I wasn't very well all the time. And then one day we heard there was likely to be another war. I'd had several breakdowns and ill health and that. I think, just finished me off nearly. Dad looked for a job in the paper and got to Croydon. He wanted to be in a college, you see. And to his amazement, he got the job as lecturer in Croydon Polytechnic.
Yeah.
So he went off because he couldn't travel from Letchworth every day. And we followed later when he found a house and rented one again at Addiscombe Avenue.
Addiscombe Avenue?
Do you know it? It's turning off Bingham, not Bingham Road, the main road.
Lower Addiscombe Road.
Lower Addiscombe Road.
Yeah, I've been up
It's
Addiscombe Avenue.
turning out of Lower Addiscombe Road. And we took
not
the house.
Burton Avenue?
No, that was the other side of the road.
Yeah.
We had the house on the lease for 3 years.
Yeah.
For 3 years. But during that time, the war broke out. Have I got to say any more?
No, keep going.
It's
let's see.
such a lot
You've got
of
3
change.
kids then, haven't you?
I've got 3 children.
Yeah.
So I fled to an auntie at Marlborough in Wiltshire,
Oh yes, I've heard of that.
leaving Dad to cope. They wouldn't take him in the army or the Air Force because he was needed at a technical college
Which
for
is
teaching,
great, really.
for training. And he had a class of girls who had to work. He had to teach machinery.
Yeah.
We used to call it Dad's harem.
Did they?
And my sister was one, but she didn't tell the others that Dad was her brother-in-law.
No.
And she used to be amused at listening to the remarks they made about him. All good ones.
Your sister, who was this then?
My sister, well, she came to stay with me.
Who would that be then?
Edith. I've
Auntie
only
Edith.
got one.
Yeah.
And she had to do some war work, so she thought she would go into Dad's class at the Poly and learn.
Engineering, sort of thing.
Well, it was, I think it was called milling and grinding.
Oh.
There was a little place in Windmill Road, somewhere at the back of Windmill Road. I forget the name of the firm.
I can't visualise Auntie Edie wielding a spanner.
Oh, it wasn't a spanner, it was a machine that used to, a lot of steel dust used to fly about and irritated her throat. I've got to tell my life story. This is going on to
I'm just ready for you. This is going for posterity, you see.
You'll wipe it off next week so you don't want to hear that old girl.
Oh, no. So we must have the silly old faggot on the tape, you see.
Well, now, where have we got to? We've got to the war.
Auntie Edie with a spanner in her hand, milling and grinding.
And I fled to Marlborough. That was 1939. Well, you know, when the war began, there was nothing much happening for 6 months.
Not for a long time, no.
No.
Phony war, they call
The
it.
Dad wrote and said, you may as well come home. By that time, I'd worn out the poor kind auntie and shattered my nerves trying to keep my children from damaging their furniture and all the things that children do. And, you know, it was a big strain, really, but I was far more frightened of the bombs, really. Anyway, Dad fetched us home. I think it was in the August, the first raid on Croydon Airport. And I saw the planes diving from the bedroom window. The children were out at play, I got them all in. And then when it was over, the warning went, or before it was over, but it wasn't quick enough. So I think there were a lot killed in a perfume factory.
Was it?
Anyway.
Where were you living at? You're still living at Addiscombe Avenue?
Addiscombe Avenue. Dad had boarded up the window, made a shutter, so that we could go into that and pull the shutter over. We had no Anderson shelter.
No.
Well, I was a bit shattered after that myself. So off we went again to Swavesey near Cambridge to Dad's Auntie Florrie, where I was not at all happy because she's the sort of lady who ruled everybody with an iron rod. and treated us all like children.
Mm.
I hadn't been there very long before Dad brought his mother down. The rains were so dreadful.
Mm.
She could sit in her shelter and look out of her shelter and see all the fires round, and they were afraid of the Woolwich Arsenal, you
Yeah.
see.
Mm.
So he brought his mother down. The poor chap had to go to and fro to look after his dad, see if he was all right,
Mm.
carry on his work at the college, look after himself. Sometimes he had no milk, sometimes he had no bread, and altogether I don't know how he got through that time. I think it was only God who helped him through it.
Yeah, times weren't easy then. What with rationing and the like.
Dreadful.
Yes. Mm.
Then he had to do fire watching as well.
Mm.
Then he decided to be a warden, an air raid warden.
Mm. Mm.
Well, Auntie Florrie was such a child to live with that I wrote to a friend at Welling Garden City
Mm.
and said, could you take us? I said, I'm expecting another baby and I've got 3 little ones. Could you take us in? And she just sent a telegram back, come at once. So Dad came down for a weekend and I had to tell the poor chap that we couldn't stay there. And he was quite shattered about it. Anyway, I packed up already a few bits and pieces and off we went to Welling Garden City where I had 1 bedroom upstairs.
Mm.
I was allowed to do my cooking on the Mrs. Ward's gas stove, but had to carry all the food upstairs. Oh, first we did have food with her, and then our husband, they were exclusive, so our husband thought it was not right to have fellowship with us, we mustn't feed with them. So I had to carry every bit of food, every cup of tea, everything up and down the stairs.
Mm.
Then all the children got measles. Mrs. Ward had 2. Mrs. Ward got the measles as well as the children, and I had all of them. 3 of mine and 2 of hers and herself. And I called the doctor in, and he said, oh, we can't have this, he said, and sent 2 of them to the isolation hospital. And then I was in such a poor state of health. I couldn't carry on. So I wrote to my sister who'd stayed at Letchworth as our doctor's cook. And she came, she left the doctor, and came and stayed with me. And I was more or less an invalid those last few months. And then Robert was born at Pear Tree Hospital. He said that's why he's so fond of pears.
Yeah. This was in Welling Garden City. Mm.
Yes.
Mm.
We had guns there. We had a couple of bombs, but not very near.
No.
And we'd hear the raiders going over to London. And if we looked out of 1 bedroom window, we could see the sky lit up from the gun flashes.
Yeah.
It's only 20 miles from London, Welling
Yeah.
Garden City.
All this time Mr. Atkins was working at Croydon.
All the while he was looking after himself, looking after other people.
Where did he lodge then, or sleep himself then?
Well, the lease ran out and we had to give up the house, and he went to live with Miss Berg, who had a maid, a faithful maid called Gertrude, and he stayed with them.
Where was that then?
That was at Addiscombe, and he went to Denmark Hall there.
Yeah.
Oh dear, my adventures. I've done nothing but move all my life. When I was young we kept moving from room to room. They had rooms in those days, nobody had a house unless they were. Well, we did have 1 house, but mostly we lived in flats and rooms.
It's only in the latter years, or well, since the war and just before, I suppose, mostly since the war, when people have started buying their own houses.
Oh yes, yeah. And that time at Kenton when they were putting them up for there were some at £6.50 and some at £8.50, and there was a little palace for £8.50.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so in those days. Yeah.
All mod con and everything. Anyway, we decided it was be too much for us.
So after, eventually you moved into this house in Bingham Road, did you? Was it Bingham Road or Shirley Road?
Shirley Church Road.
Shirley Church Road, was it?
Mm.
Oh, that was quite a nice road, that, wasn't it?
Yes, it was very nice. I loved it there. If the war hadn't been on, I would have been very happy.
That was the road that led up towards
We're on the Shirley
Addington,
Hills. Yes.
Led to what, Spout
The
Hill.
road up to Spout Hill.
Yeah,
and
nice road that,
Addington.
yeah.
And it was very nice.
Mm.
We went to Addiscombe Hall there, which was quite a good walk.
It was, yeah.
And I
quite
used
a
to
good
tell
walk,
the
yeah.
children when they went to Sunday school, if the siren went, they were to run into anybody's house on their way home or to school. I don't remember that it ever did.
No.
But it was, we were